Welcome back, everyone, to the All Sorts podcast. We're so glad you're here, ready to dive into another fascinating topic with us.
It's great to be back.
Before we jump in, just a quick reminder, especially if you're tuning in on YouTube, hitting that like button really does help us out. It lets us know you're enjoying the journey.
Absolutely. And share this deep dive if you think someone else might find it interesting. Subscribing to the All Sorts podcast channel means you won't miss out on future explorations.
Yeah, become part of our community. And don't forget, there's a whole back catalog of deep dives waiting for you. Tons of different subjects we've explored.
Definitely worth checking out. Plus, you can follow the All Sorts podcast on X, Instagram, and Threads for, updates and maybe some behind-the-scenes stuff.
Okay, community shout-outs done. Are you ready for today's topic? It's a bit of a heavy one.
I am. It's important, though. We're looking at justice corrupted, tampering, and revenge.
Exactly. We're going into those times when the whole idea of justice, of fairness gets twisted, manipulated, or driven by revenge.
And we've pulled together quite a range of sources for this one ancient history, legal documents, even some true crime analysis. It's a pretty diverse material.
It really is. So our mission today is to sift through all that, pull out the core ideas, the really crucial bits, and try to make sense of how justice can go so wrong. Okay, so where do we start with this idea of justice being warped by revenge?
Well, maybe the best place is way back, looking at how revenge was sort of built into early justice systems, like the Code of Hammurabi.
Oh, yeah, ancient Babylon, right? About 1760 BC, the whole eye for an eye thing.
Exactly that. Hammurabi's code is one of the earliest examples we have of, socially approved revenge, systemic revenge.
So eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. It sounds brutal now, but back then?
Back then, it was actually a step towards control. Instead of, endless blood feuds where retaliation could escalate indefinitely, this set a limit. Lex talionis, the law of retaliation.
Lex talionis. Okay, so it formalized it. You do X, the consequence is Y, and that's it.
Pretty much. But it still fundamentally ties justice to that basic human urge for payback, which is a tension we see again and again.
Can you give an example from the Coda?
Sure. One law stated that if someone went to help put out a house fire but then stole something from the house, they were to be thrown into that same fire.
Whoa. Okay. That's direct.
Very. Or a less fiery one.
Mm-hmm.
If you caught and returned a runaway slave, the owner had to pay you 2 shekels of silver, a set reward.
It's fascinating how specific it was. But this connection, justice, and revenge. Is there something psychological going on? Why do people want revenge so badly sometimes?
Well, neuroscience actually gives us a clue. Studies show that carrying out an act of vengeance can light up pleasure centers in the brain, specifically the dorsal striatum.
Pleasure centers.
Yeah.
So getting revenge actually feels good on a biological level.
It can, yeah. It can provide a sense of satisfaction, of reward, which is kind of unsettling when you think about trying to build impartial justice systems.
Definitely unsettling. It makes you wonder how that subconscious drive might influence things. Okay, let's jump forward quite a bit. Japan. The 47 Ronin. That's a famous story about revenge, but a very different kind.
A classic, yeah. It's all about loyalty, honor, and very delayed, very calculated vengeance. This was the early 1700s.
Right. It starts with a daimyo, Lord Asano Naganori. He attacked another official, Kira Yoshinaka, inside Edo Castle. Didn't kill him, but wounded him.
Correct. And for drawing his sword in the castle, Asano was ordered to commit seppuku ritual suicide. The reasons for the initial attack are still debated, maybe insults or protocol issues.
And seppuku meant his lands were confiscated, his family line dispossessed, and his samurai became
Ronin, masterless samurai. And 47 of Asano's samurai swore a secret oath. They would avenge their master's death and restore his honor by killing Kira Yoshinaka.
But they didn't do it right away, did they? That's the striking part.
No, not at all. They waited for almost 2 years.
2 years. What were they doing?
Laying low, they dispersed, took up trades merchants, monks, drunks even, to throw Kira off guard. They made him think they'd given up, that they weren't a threat anymore, all while secretly plotting.
Incredible discipline. Or maybe, like you said, calculation, making the revenge more impactful.
Perhaps. Then finally, they launched a surprise attack on Kira's mansion, found him hiding.
And they killed him.
Well, first they offered him the chance to die honorably, like their master, to commit seppuku himself.
Can he take it?
No, he refused. Or maybe he was too scared. So they beheaded him.
And
Then they took Kira's head, marched it across town to the Sengakuji temple where Asano was buried, washed the head in a well, and placed it before their master's tomb. Vengeance achieved.
Wow, talk about a statement. But what happened to the Ronin themselves? They couldn't just walk away after that.
No. They turned themselves in. There was a big debate among the shogunate officials about what to do. They'd fulfilled their duty of loyalty, Bushido, but they'd also defied the shogun's law by taking revenge.
A real conflict of principles.
Oh, exactly. In the end, they were also ordered to commit seppuku. 46 of them did. The fate of the 47th is a bit unclear. Some say he was pardoned, maybe because he was young or sent as a messenger.
So they achieved their revenge, but paid the ultimate price. And people still argue about whether they did the right thing, right?
Oh, absolutely. For centuries. Should they have acted immediately? Should they have not sought revenge at all? Should they have committed seppuku right after killing Kira without surrendering? It highlights just how complex these ideas of honor, loyalty, law, and revenge can be.
Yeah, the waiting part really adds a layer. Was it strategic brilliance or making it more of a spectacle? Okay, let's shift gears again. Across the world, different conflict. U.S. Civil War, Montgomery Meigs and Arlington National Cemetery.
Ah, yes. Another case where personal feelings seem to have played a huge role in a major historical development.
And he was a Union general, quartermaster general, important job. And he knew Robert E. Lee before the war, right?
He did. They'd served together. And when Lee, who owned the Arlington estate just across the river from Washington, D.C., decided to side with the Confederacy, Meigs apparently took it very personally, saw it as a profound betrayal.
So revenge motive.
It certainly looks that way. In 1864, the Union needed more burial space for soldiers dying in huge numbers. Arlington House and its grounds had been confiscated from the Lees. Meigs proposed using part of Lee's estate as a national cemetery.
Okay, on the surface, a practical solution to a grim problem.
True. But Meigs seems to have gone further. He specifically pushed for burials to be made right up close to the mansion, even in Mrs. Lee's beloved rose garden.
Why there? Just to be spiteful.
The interpretation is that he wanted to make it physically and emotionally impossible for the Lees to ever want to live there again, even if they somehow got the property back after the war. Burying Union dead, including a mass grave for unknown soldiers, right in their front yard, essentially.
So using the war dead as a tool for personal vengeance against Lee.
That's the argument. He wanted to ensure the land was permanently associated with the Union victory and Lee's, quote-unquote, treason.
Did it work? Did the Lees ever get Arlington back?
No. They tried after the war, but Meigs' strategy, combined with the political climate, made it impossible. Eventually, their son sued, and the government ended up paying him $150,000 for the property, which was a significant sum then, but still, they lost their ancestral home.
And now it's Arlington National Cemetery, one of the most sacred places in the U.S., born partly out of a personal vendetta. That's something.
It really makes you think about the hidden currents beneath historical events, doesn't it?
It does. Okay, from that kind of calculated long-term revenge, let's turn to something much more immediate, raw, and, frankly, horrifying. The Dachau Massacre. End of World War II.
Yeah, this is a very dark example. When American soldiers from the 45th Infantry Division liberated the Dachau concentration camp in April 1945, the things they saw were beyond comprehension.
Unimaginable atrocities. I know they found the death train.
That's right. Just outside the camp, dozens of rail cars packed with thousands of emaciated, decomposing bodies of prisoners who died during transport. The sight, the smell, it apparently just broke something in some of the soldiers.
Understandable, the shock and horror must have been overwhelming. But what happened next?
Well, as the camp surrendered, some SS guards were captured, and according to investigations later, some American soldiers took direct, brutal revenge.
You mean they killed surrendered soldiers?
Yes. Accounts describe groups of unarmed German soldiers, including SS personnel, being lined up against a wall and machine-gunned. Estimates vary, but maybe around 30, perhaps more, were killed this way after they'd surrendered.
Just executed on the spot.
And there were also reports of soldiers giving weapons to the newly freed inmates and basically letting them or even encouraging them to kill their former captors.
So justice completely broke down into immediate violent retribution.
It seems so. In that moment, for some soldiers, the horror they witnessed just overwhelmed discipline, rules and engagement, everything. It became raw vengeance.
What was the official reaction? Did anyone face consequences?
General Patton, who was in command in the area, apparently downplayed it. The Army did conduct an investigation, confirmed killings happened, but the report was classified, kept secret for decades. It was essentially covered up.
A cover-up. So even when revenge leads to war crimes, the system sometimes protects itself.
It's a deeply disturbing incident. It shows how even those fighting against horrific evil can be susceptible to committing atrocities themselves when consumed by rage and the desire for revenge.
A grim reminder. Okay, let's shift from historical events to something more procedural, but still about corruption. Evidence tampering. We have this Mississippi mock trial case concerning Connor Hastings' death.
Right. This brings us to a different kind of corruption, not necessarily driven by immediate emotion, but by potentially manipulating the legal process itself.
What's the key issue here?
A crucial piece of evidence is Exhibit 9. It's a note handwritten on a menu, supposedly by the victim, Connor Hastings.
Okay, what's the problem with it?
The problem is, the original note vanished from the evidence room.
Vanished, like lost, or taken.
That's the million-dollar question. It disappeared before forensic analysis could determine when it was written. The ink dating, things like that.
But they know Hastings wrote it. The handwriting was confirmed.
Yes, that was stipulated. Everyone agreed it was Hastings' handwriting. But without knowing the date, the note's value is severely compromised. It could support different timelines.
And that raises the specter of evidence tampering.
Yeah.
Someone might have wanted that date to remain unknown.
Exactly. And this connects to another figure in the case, Lou Christoph.
The loan shark. He was initially a suspect.
Yes. And importantly, Christoph had a history with the lead investigator on the Hastings case, Detective Finch. In a previous bribery case against Christoph, Finch was actually accused of tampering with evidence.
Finch was accused before. Is anything proven?
No, Christoph wasn't convicted in that bribery case, and Finch seemingly faced no formal consequences for the tampering accusation. But the history is there. It creates suspicion around Finch's handling of evidence in this case.
And didn't one of the witnesses, Sidney Young, write about this kind of thing?
Yes, Young published a piece called Bent Cops and Tampered Evidence, which provides some, let's say, expert context on the potential for this kind of misconduct.
Okay, so you have a missing crucial note, a detective with a past accusation. What was the prosecution actually arguing happened to Connor Hastings? Who did they accuse?
They focused on Lane King, Hastings' business partner. The theory was premeditated murder. They argued King deliberately locked Hastings in the restaurant's walk-in cooler, knowing it would kill him via hypothermia.
And the evidence for premeditation.
They pointed to the fact that King bought a brand new padlock, Exhibit 8, shortly after he supposedly found out Hastings was stealing money from the business. They had the receipt from Fondren Lock and Key.
A new lock right after discovering theft. That looks suspicious.
It does. Plus, King's fingerprints were found on that new padlock and on the cooler door handle. Also on a kitchen knife found nearby, though its relevance wasn't entirely clear.
King's prints were there. What about Lou Christoph's?
Crucially, none of Lou Christoph's fingerprints were found anywhere inside the restaurant.
And Detective Finch, when asked about the missing note or tampering,
he denied everything. Said he wasn't in charge of the evidence room, basically deflected responsibility.
Okay, so the physical evidence points towards King, but the key note is missing, potentially due to tampering involving a detective with a history. What about Lou Christoph? Why were charges dropped against him?
Christoph cut a deal. The charges were dropped after he gave a statement implicating Lane King.
Ah, the classic informant deal. So his testimony helps the prosecution against King, and he walks free.
Essentially, yes. But you have to remember, Christoph admits he's involved in criminal activity, he's a loan shark. And there's that whole history with Detective Finch and the prior evidence tampering accusation against Finch in Christoph's own case. It's messy.
Very messy. And wasn't there another witness, someone who was in jail with Christoph? Jamie Kennedy.
Right. Kennedy testified that Christoph made incriminating statements about the Hastings case while they shared a cell, basically suggesting Christoph was more involved than he let on.
But Christoph denies this.
Completely. Christoph claims Kennedy is lying, just trying to get a better deal for himself by fabricating testimony. So you have conflicting accounts, potentially self-serving motives all around.
It really highlights how unreliable testimony can be, especially when deals are on the table.
Absolutely. Which brings us back to that missing note, Exhibit 9.
Yeah, that seems central, without knowing when it was written.
Exactly. It could have supported King's story. King claimed Hastings wanted to jot down some menu ideas that night, which might explain him being near the cooler or holding a menu.
But no other notes were found, just the one that later turned up via King's lawyers, the one that went missing.
Correct. No other menu notes from that night were found by investigators. So did Hastings write it that night, as King claimed? Or earlier? We can't know because the original is gone.
The missing note leaves a huge hole. It could potentially corroborate or destroy King's defense, and its disappearance under suspicious circumstances taints the whole process.
It perfectly illustrates how tampering, or even just the suspicion of tampering, can completely undermine the search for truth in a justice system. It introduces doubt that's hard to erase.
So looking back at everything we've discussed, Hammurabi, the Ronin, Meigs, Dachau, this mock trial, what's the thread connecting them all?
I think the core thread is the fragility of justice when confronted by powerful human factors, whether it's the raw, ancient urge for revenge encoded into early law,
Or the highly disciplined, honor-bound vengeance of the Ronin.
or the calculated personal vendetta shaping national landmarks like with Meigs.
Or the immediate brutal breakdown of discipline fueled by horrific trauma, like at Dachau.
Or the more modern, insidious corruption through manipulating the very evidence the system relies on, like the missing note. In every case, human emotion, bias, or deliberate manipulation finds a way to warp the process.
And it shows that revenge, while maybe understandable on a human level sometimes, is a terrible foundation for actual justice.
Okay.
And tampering just destroys the possibility of finding truth.
Precisely. The ideal of impartial justice requires constant vigilance against these corrupting influences, both emotional and procedural. Transparency, accountability, they're crucial.
This has been really illuminating, unpacking how these forces work. It definitely leaves you thinking.
It does, and maybe that leads to our final thought for you, the listener, to ponder. We build these complex systems aiming for fairness, for truth. But how easily can those systems be undermined from within by a personal grudge, or by someone simply hiding or changing a single piece of paper?
That's a powerful question. How fragile is the foundation when those motivations are always potentially present? Something to really chew on. Well, thank you for guiding us through that complex and often dark territory. And thank you for joining us on this deep dive from the All Sorts podcast.
It's been a pleasure, despite the heavy topic.
If this exploration sparked something for you, we'd love it if you'd like, share, and subscribe to the All Sorts podcast on YouTube. It helps others find these conversations.
And do explore the back catalog. There's a lot more there. Follow the All Sorts podcast on X, Instagram, and Threads to keep the conversation going.
We appreciate you spending your time with us. Until the next deep dive, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep seeking understanding in this complicated world.